stream here. Um, the stream has to be dark because we're born alone and we die alone. And when I finish the stream, there's also loneliness, and probably nobody's watching at that point anyway. And this is the stream. Sometimes you can say like, "Hey Siri, traffic to work," and nothing happens. Hey Siri, traffic to work.
Traffic to work is light, so I'm estimating 31 minutes via I-75 South.
Exactly. And this gives you a sense of security. And then, like, if you lost your vaping device, you're kind of like, "Hey Siri," but it no longer is relevant because Siri isn't there. And in this way, the technology really gives us a full sense of security. And it's just another kind of a lie that our mind clings to, like a big real, like a cat with 1,000 claws that is connected to different things, and some claws are really tiny and thin, and when they get ripped away, it doesn't matter. But then there are some kind of bigger claws and connected with a bigger sort of limb of a cat, that when that kind of really rips a part of you really strongly. And in this manner, we continue to live, I guess. And Brian, any thoughts on this?
A multitude of thoughts. The technology, it's truly a wonder and yet a curse at the same time, removing us from our world, removing us from our humanity. I noticed that did you change Siri's voice? Did you change the way that she sounds on your phone?
No. Do you have Alexa or something? I mean, that's
maybe I have Alexa. Maybe. Wait a second. Wait. Hey Siri, what time is it?
It's 9:34 p.m.
I changed mine. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I like that Australian accent.
Mm-hmm. Well, what can I say there? I guess, I mean, this is where we're going with further and further customization of this sort. We won't even need like a young honey to validate us. It's just going to be a robot answering tenderly. Would this be good? Maybe some of the time.
Hey Siri, do you love me?
I think you're pretty great.
It works.
Yeah, it does. So I have to sort of make an apology here for Showbiz Robbins. Big fucking entertainment pants Robbins has gotten too big for this stream. And it's hard to know what's going on with him. I mean, he claims to be working right now. But we did go to Bob Evans yesterday, and it's an American chain, and had a few, like, he had a turkey dinner. And I have to confess that Mr. Robbins kind of sent me a message that this could be the only kind of a dinner he might have, only turkey dinner he might have this season, which sounded very kind of melancholy. But then it turns out that he's just avoiding his family, I guess, like he's avoiding the stream. So it wasn't really kind of not so much that he was deprived of anything, as much as it was a personal sort of a disengagement from family affairs. And also, Mr. Robbins told me that he went to like a Mountie Crew cover band concert somewhere. Nice. Somewhere in like rural Ohio, and he told me that there were two ladies there dancing, ladies of the like the what are the exotic dancers there who were hired by this band to accompany them. And Mr. Robbins was very upset by the behavior of the patrons. He pointed out that there were some individuals who were really taking pictures of them and really acting disrespectfully. And he noticed that these people were mostly women. and I asked about the demographics of this event, and he said that they were rednecks. And so at the end of it, like, I guess these women were tipped by the patrons, and Mr. Robbins was judgmental of those who didn't tip, and then he himself offered a tip of $2. He said, since I looked at them, he gave them $2. So, and then at work, for some reason, he said to somebody that he gave $5 and then felt kind of shame, but he didn't mean to say that he gave more than he did, allegedly, but then thought it wasn't like enough of a white lie to correct. So this is basically what's going on with Mr. Robbins. Now, Brian, any thoughts on any of this?
Mr. Robbins is a complex individual. You know, I just imagine Mr. Robbins gobbling down his turkey dinner, going for a 5-mile run, you know, his junk all banging around in his shorts. I don't know what Mr. Robbins is up to right now, but I hope he has clothes on.
Well, presumably he's working, but I do have a strong suspicion that he's just watching us right now. That's what...
That's why I hope he has clothes on.
Yeah. So, let's see. Before I forget, I am finishing up the Buddhist video to the extent that anybody's interested. So it should come out soon. I am working on it. So that's something that's going on. And now, Brian, how would you introduce yourself to the audience?
I would say that I run a channel called the Stalmer Street Journal. I go by Mr. Street over there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I do videos just along the lines of my interests, which are philosophy, religion, politics, that type of shit.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the mind kind of drifts toward certain points of your biography. And the one that always kind of stood out for me is the fact that you worked at a strip club in spite of being a feminist and overall being respectful of women.
It's true.
And being also very kind of tender, a tender man and a tender masculine weeper.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
I am.
So
I am all of the above.
So what would be the kind of pith moment of working at a strip club where you were like a videographer? What was like the one sort of essence of that experience that you would like to share with the audience who never heard you tell this on Patreon?
The essence of the experience was one of just complete awe in the human condition, the relationship that we have with one another in this terrible system that commodifies a human being into just a mere fleeting nugget of entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Is this real?
Is it real?
No, I mean, is this real what you're telling me right now?
It's absolutely 100% real and genuine, sincere.
Oh. Okay.
People have difficulty. This is another thing that I could preface myself with. People often think that I'm joking when I'm absolutely serious.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the strange smirk, could be my tone, could be any number of things. However, my difficulty working in the strip club was, again, seeing everyone as a human being in the establishment, including those people who might be the exploiters, the ones taking advantage of this system we have created.
So in the midst of like petty lusts and like in the midst of like this island of flesh and intimacy without intimacy and exchange of money for some longing that seems sexual but could be much more than that. In the midst of this, you focused on the humanity of this whole thing.
Ultimately, dancers and the people running the place are human beings, you know, to whatever degree you want to judge their lives or their actions. The patrons as well, you know, the patrons are the ones that you really have to question. I think walking into the establishment, it was my job. I worked for a local cable company, and we had signed a contract to do TV commercials. I made the TV commercials for the establishment for about 5 years.
Mm.
And over that span of time, as you can imagine, there were numerous occasions where I met porn stars.
But what would
Exotic-
be the story? What would be like the Dostoevsky kind of moment for you there? Like something with a story, like a stripper with a heart or something.
Well, I think that the key story for me, of course, like I knew the dancers and things like that, but I think central to everything was the owner. We'll call him the boss,
Yeah.
which is what he's, you know, his own self-styling there. The boss, Big D, you know, he was a rather lonely fellow in his personal time. He had few friends. We would often meet for lunch, go out. We would go meet at the club. I got a peek into his personal life based on some of the people that he brought to the studio when we would have to use a green screen to shoot some porn stars for commercials. And, you know, it seemed like he kind of had a rotating girlfriend and one tight friend that he, I suppose, could trust. And other than that, like, he used the club for, I think, to kind of fill in a lot of things for him. Like, he didn't have to have another job. Obviously, he was the owner operator of this place.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you think you projected a certain malaise on him, or was it just there? Do you think that you wanted to see him as this lonely, semi-tragic figure in this like carnival flesh that he has created around?
No, not at all. Because every instance where I was surprised by him, and actually he was somewhat awkward with people. It was pretty surprising to me, and so those moments informed my view of him. Where otherwise you have a very particular impression of a person who runs a strip club, you know, you kind of you go into that with a very big preconceived notion, and in actuality,
There was a vulnerability to the man. There was a tenderness to the boss that you didn't expect.
you know, the boss was isolated, and it was actually so interesting to me that I approached him with a idea to do a reality TV show. And this is years ago. This is 10 years ago, and they actually had garnered some attention on the national level. They got invited to the Adult AVN Awards, and I felt like it could have gone somewhere. But Darius, he had a particular view of, you know, the way he wanted to present himself, and that was as the boss.
Yeah. So that was it, basically. There wasn't enough entertainment value in the nuances between the persona of the boss and the tender reality of the boss. There was a certain kind of, you know, a certain something, a certain contrast that the boss didn't want to have penetrated by your lens. And so the show didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, the show, he understandably so, he didn't want to reveal those aspects of his own life, which that's fine if you're a private individual, but it seemed as though he was more interested in being in the spotlight, especially around the time when he started to see some success.
Would you say that? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
At that point, he wanted to start inserting himself into the advertisements and getting his own face all up in there. And generally, it was interesting because one of the first things we joked about was someone having their face all up on a business.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that that was that was actually him after all. So there was a strange relationship there between what he thought of himself, his ego that had grown because the business had suddenly seen a relatively large success rate with its feature acts. And yeah, it's interesting.
So there was a self-destructive notion there.
At least in an egotistical sense, I think, and the fact that you're in a business that basically treats people as disposable objects. I mean,
yeah.
How are you gonna orient yourself to other people in your life? Kind of makes sense.
Have you ever seen like a performer fall in love with a client, or a sort of where there was a breakthrough when a certain something took a lady off the pole, and that something was love? Have you ever seen it there?
I feel I can only really speak to my own experience in this case. Like, there were a couple of instances where I was familiar with the dancers, and we had rapport because of either them going to the studio, seeing where I worked, and then me being on location, seeing where they worked, and them kind of insinuating, or in some cases offering things, and I was just like, nah, like I'm not here for that. I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed the atmosphere. I very much enjoyed being around the boss. But when it
really like the boss more than the ladies, and you were more interested in the narrative.
I felt like he was a good guy deep down, but he was just in a very confused situation. And being central to all that, and in that type of atmosphere, it can play tricks on you. As many men who are tricks walk into the club, they themselves fall under the spell. So maybe him being in the locus of all of that was kind of fooled into this lifestyle that really wasn't even his. Like, it really wasn't even his own lifestyle.
Yeah,
but he wanted to project that image,
right?
So it's kind of a tragic fall in a sense, and he suffered some losses. I know that his Ice-T concert, which I attended the VIP version of. There was like 15 or 20 people there.
Yeah.
So there are certain instances where the ego needs checked, and it's all good. It was a fun time for me as just a guy who was, making a few bucks making TV commercials.
Well, I guess this is a certain kind of a person, a certain kind of a certain kind of entry into the strip club results in a certain type of vision. So your vision as you entered the strip club, as you entered this realm, fixated on the narrative of the boss, and seemingly less so on the ladies. Seems like the boss was really kind of what drew your attention at the end of the day. And this perhaps explains some kind of differences from you and another man. And I'm sure that if I was there, this would be exactly the kind of where I would gravitate my view as well eventually. We want that narrative. We want the pathos. Some people are interested in something else, but we're here for the pathos. Fucking show me the pathos.
I mean, you can
show
see
me the pathos, right?
there are naked women.
Yeah,
there are naked women everywhere, and it's like once you've seen one dancer perform, and you've seen the rest of the crew, what more do you really need after that? 45-minute set.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do if you're there for 3 hours doing stuff?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot more to it. It's not that I don't appreciate the feminine form. Of course I do. It just so happens that, there was kind of a character in the midst of all of this. But it was good. It was a good time, man. And you know what? I very much respect women, and I think that sex workers deserve equal rights, if not, fully legalizing certain things that we consider to be immoral or whatever you want to call it here in this country. Many other countries are much more progressive than us, and we should probably get on the level, just for the sake of the workers.
Yeah. Yes. So this was, when I first heard the story, I was very intrigued by it because I think that, there's something to it. Like, it's a kind of a childish dream to be in some sort of a situation like that for certain types of people. And then when you do, as always, it doesn't exactly turn out the way you want it to. It is filled with nuance and things like that. And it's true, you do see a lady, like Brian pointed out, and it's like, well, I've seen the lady already. I mean, it's like, right? You've seen the lady, right?
Once you've seen the lady, I mean, is there anything like the first time?
Nothing.
Nothing is like the first time.
Yes. So this kind of, I don't have a neat detour here, but I guess I'll go this way. So right now I'm kind of tired because I didn't sleep well. Early in the morning there were children here, and these children were, of course, the progeny of people who live normal lives. That is to say, my stepbrother and his wife. And these children were boisterous as they are, and for many people, 11 in the morning isn't so early, but for me it's very early. And so when they ran around outside of my door, I was very upset, and then the noise really didn't quiet down from there, and so I was sleep deprived. And so I have decided at that point to go ahead and visit my grandmother at the hospital. And that's why I'm kind of a little bit tired right now, because I went to sleep at like 6 or 7 a.m. So my grandmother's at the hospital, and her condition seems to be pretty serious. She went in to get a heart operation. But when she got there, her heart rate was so fast that they had to postpone it until it stabilizes. And now she's kind of pretty tired and seemingly not super enthused about living, even though there isn't anything like there isn't kind of like, I don't know. I guess the situation is as it is. It's not critical, but it's not great. So I've been spending time at the hospital and really kind of been sort of reflecting, I guess, on my own kind of coldness, or my lack of kind of true, clear sentiment. That is to say, I kind of process her suffering on a more abstract level. Now, Brian, I missed your white noise associated with your microphone.
Sorry.
That's all right. But do you have these issues with the passing away of relatives? Or, I mean, she hasn't passed away, and I hope that she doesn't. But in those types of situations where you felt that you had a script of empathy that was genuine, but you were going through that script in a kind of somewhat of a removed manner, in a detached manner. Your heart wasn't fully tender.
Yeah, that's. I feel like that's pretty normal. Have you ever lost anyone else close to you?
Actually, no. Like my grandfather when I was 14, but that was, I mean, I was a child.
All right, so both of my parents are passed, and I watched both of them die. And I think at first, really, you can't you can't fully understand the gravity of the situation. So there's automatically distance. Beyond that, you know, if they're in the process of dying, you know, afterwards, once they're gone, that is a complete reorientation if that person was a key person in your life, you know. So something like that, you can't help but feel removed and even alienated from yourself for a time. So I can't say that what you're experiencing is abnormal at all. I mean, I feel like that's actually really normal. Of course, there's levels of sympathy, empathy, but you know that you can't really understand it because you're not the one. You're not there. You're not in that. So actually, I feel like the distancing is better because it keeps you from assuming that you know what the person is experiencing, which is, I mean, that's the realistic thing, is that you have no idea. And so in both of my parents' cases, I really, my mom passed first, and I was a lot younger. But I was 20, I was 21, 20 or 21, and I really had no context for it, and no real way to process it as it was happening. It was just sort of a long, slow, painful event that led to inevitable and permanent change in my life.
Mm. But you experienced it in a removed way.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna feel removed while someone's laying there suffering, dying.
Yeah.
If that's the process that she's in, I mean, you know, maybe not now, but at some point in the future, um, you can't possibly know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, I don't want to really kind of reveal kind of things about my grandmother, but effectively,
Sure.
like, for a long time, like, she said, like, when I visited her, she said, you know, in Russia, if I stayed back there, I wouldn't experience this kind of care, and I just would have died earlier when it was my time.
Hmm.
And so she would say things like that forever. And so for me, it was kind of hard to gauge like her actual kind of health condition, but recently it's clearly deteriorated, and I kind of feel also like when my mother goes there versus when I go there, we seem to have different experience, and my mother is just more sensitive to that, to her condition. My grandmother's, even if I spend like a couple of hours there, I just find myself kind of not being as engaged, or not that I feel this like some sort of a burden to see my grandmother. I do kind of like going there, well, in the context, but it also just kind of reveals like what a kind of a man child I am, in a way that I like my life is so completely disorganized that when something like this happens, I just kind of realize that if I was on my own and had to take care of somebody, I would just utterly be unable to do it. Um, but that kind of has to do with being unable to take care of myself also. But yeah, so you know, I don't know about her medical condition. It doesn't seem like she's kind of in a state where she could pass away, but at the same time, she could go on and live longer. It's just difficult to tell. So, but yeah, I don't know. But what you said was helpful about the abstract nature of it. Feel a little bit kind of less guilty or something. I feel like, yeah, your mic.
If you haven't lost anyone who's really close to you, then that first time is really like the most difficult reorientation process. So it hasn't even, if it hasn't really even happened yet, then you've got to get used to that. And then once you're more familiar with the process, I think at that point, then there's more empathy because you understand the dying process.
Yeah. I feel like if I had a lady friend and I was really in love with her, then my experiences of her suffering or her being in that situation would be way less abstract.
Mhm.
Is it your impression with yourself, or?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I like when it's your partner, when it's someone you imagine going through life with, it's very, very different. Because your parents, as much as your parents are important figures to you, once you hit a certain point, for me, when my parents passed, I was already an adult. I already, to an extent, especially when my father passed much more recently. I already was already married. My life was already set up. So that is still a distance or a distancing factor, and so when it's someone who's closer in age to you, your partner, um, at that point, I feel like you're kind of in it with them up until the end. Like
Mhm.
what my father experienced, losing his wife.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say overall, I think I'm a kind of a pretty kind of somewhat of a cold person. I think I register a lot of these things more of like intellectually. It has to filter through. Doesn't really start at the tender heart. The heart seems to be preoccupied with something more abstract and self-centered, generally speaking, like with some abstract nausea or some abstract sense of loss for myself. And I'm not. This is not good. And then with the grandmother, I feel sad about her, or I feel sad walking into her room and seeing her things there, and then I have to like bring it down into the heart. Whereas on its own, it doesn't seem to kind of dwell there as naturally as different like narcissistic melancholy. That's the reserved space. That's like the mat, like a dog's bed or something that is reserved for that kind of a melancholy, self-pitying dog, and then you have to lead another sentiment there carefully, and it'll never occupy the full bed, it seems, unless it was a lady friend who can then easily plug into the narcissism.
Yeah, no, that's I see what you're saying. I really like grief and these things. They have stages, and until you're actually past the point where like she's gone, you've had time. Like at that point, that's when you really start to feel things.
Mm.
Um, even in the process of someone dying, like all the way up until they're dead, you
Mm.
may not even realize the gravity of the situation.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I don't I still I mean I know what you're saying. I still don't think it's really abnormal, but
Mm.
um,
No, but what you said was helpful. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. Um, no, it was really helpful. I think that there's a special kind of detached way I'm experiencing it, but maybe not as special as I thought, and that's good. So now, did you want to close up the topic, or?
I mean, to an extent, you have to be in order to
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
You have to distance yourself from the person. It's actually really normal, from what I've experienced, to feel like you don't want to see the person.
Mm.
And if you like, even magical thinking, like if I go and see the person at the hospital, like maybe they'll die, and I don't want that to happen. Like these types of things. So I mean, it's your orientation, your relationship with that situation kind of comes first to you
Mhm.
before the person, and that seems like a selfish, shitty thing right now. But you will have time if, I mean, eventually, like, your grandmother will pass. I don't know now or in the future,
Mhm.
but you will experience that whole process.
Yeah.
And I feel like for people, both of my parents were relatively young, but I feel like people who are more, older, lived a fuller life, the things that your grandmother was saying, like, she's like, I would have died naturally, at my time, I would have died in my time. Just the fact that she's saying things like that, like, she's ready to go,
Well, the thing is, like, she was ready to go for a long time, at least according to her words. But that
Mhm.
kind of gets into some stuff I don't want to.
Sure.
Yeah, but yeah, my grandmother had a pretty difficult life, starting from like growing up during World War II in like a village and having like borderline starvation, which like made her preoccupied specifically with my food intake
Mhm.
to the extent that I used to like throw away food in Russia out of our window because she just would give me so much food and I just was tired of refusing it, so I started throwing it out. And then they discovered when the cat was like licking the side of the window. And let's see. Yeah, so then there are things in her life that I'm not going to get into. So the one good thing is that, like, about my inability to function as an adult is that I was living here and she's, spent her years, and I hope she has more years to live, of course, but she spent much of the time being with her daughter and grandson, who people she cares about. So that was the one kind of a positive thing, because when I'm on my own, I rarely talk to anyone, um, including my parents and her also. And it's difficult to talk to her just over the phone because she always thinks that I'm sick and that I'm like borderline dying and starving, literally a lot of the time. And uh, when you're depressed and somebody talks to you like you're dying, it's kind of a weird conversation. But whereas living here, we can have more small talk and kind of things like that, drop by her room and stuff like that. So anyway, so that's that about this. So for the next kind of trick in the stream, we're gonna watch a video of Jordan Peterson, and then I'm gonna tell you my Batman script that is a product of my manic episodes. It's gonna be an outline of my animated Batman movie, I guess, for HBO, a very dark animated film. We're gonna talk about like the murder involving a Russian Napoleon impersonator, and talk about the environment, I guess. But before all of that, generally speaking, people on these streams, I guess, they talk about their lives. So my life sort of involves a lot of stuff with bipolar disorder. So once again, this isn't a cry of pity. It's just like if I had young honeys and adventures, I would talk about that. But since I have like bodhisattvas and different kind of adventures of this sort, of
Yeah.
cries for meaning and rolling around and meaning, like if a fucking like this pointless quests for meaning were like a ray of sunshine, I would be like a fucking cat that endlessly like rolls around in it to the point of depriving itself of food. Um, so that's basically what we're going to talk about. But I'm obviously aware that people experience their own kind of struggles, and worse than mine, and of course my grandmother right now. So this is just a little kind of a peek back into, in case any of you are studying for psychiatry or for being a doctor or something. Um, so basically, recently I have gone to my therapist, and we were filling out some form, like they have to fill out some forms every year. At which point he asked my age. Now I happen to not remember my age. At which point he calculated it. When he calculated it, I started arguing with him, kind of disputing it a little bit. But later on, when I kind of did my own calculation, it did in fact turn out that I'm a year older than I thought. My birthday's coming up sometime next month, and in order to keep, I guess, women guessing, I'm not going to reveal my specific age. But it was a big surprise for me once again, and I think this happens every year when I get very surprised by how old I actually am. And so this kind of made me reflect on a lot of things this year, which basically started out for me with a reasonable kind of expectation that I'm going to make more videos about, the topics I've been making them about, which was Peterson and so on, and that I could grow my Patreon and maybe one day reach whatever, $1,000 or something, However, then I got really interested in working out. So this was good because through being obsessed with protein shakes, I did lose something like 40 pounds, which was nice. But then everything shifted gears to Buddhism, and now my whole year has been a year of Buddhism. Now, I didn't really choose it. There was no point where I said, this is what I'm going to be interested in. It just kind of took over my head. And I have now been communicating with Bodhisattva, well, specifically with Green Tara intermediary, here and there. And I have the thought of being a reincarnated Mongol Lama has returned in my head, which is in the back of my head. And recently, Green Tara joked that I'm going to make love with 3 ladies until the end of the year. But I think we both knew it was a joke. You see, that's when you laugh to yourself, when you know that it's a joke like that. So in some ways, like, I talk about this in a kind of a rationalistic way, kind of removing myself from it and dissecting it. But in the meantime, while I dissect it in front of other people and myself to some degree, all the other time I'm literally consumed with this stuff, and it's literally all I think about the whole day. So kind of made me think about that. I always miss that white noise, Brian, when it disappears.
Sorry.
So no, that's all right. But so yeah, that's basically kind of like, once again, kind of get reminded of this, like it's something new. And it's like I was talking with another person about these experiences where, on the one hand, if I invalidate them, then my whole adult life is basically wasted, because that's my whole adult life, stuff like this in different variations. On the other hand, I kind of have to invalidate it to treat it also, to pursue like antipsychotics and whatever to shut this down. But it's kind of like I just kind of deceive myself with this irony and bullshit about it. But in the meantime, my whole year is gone, more or less. And now I'm like surprised at how old I am. So recently, also, like, I had kind of signs of kind of depression with suicidal thinking, and I was working, and I went to an elevator at a hospital. And I went into the elevator with a few people, and I started pressing the button for my floor, and I pressed it 3 times. And the lady is like, well, we're on this floor. So I was pressing the 4th floor 3 times on the one on which we were. And then I was like, oh, and then I pushed the right button, and then I left, and the lady was like, well, have a good day. But she kind of said it in a kind of pitying way, like there was something, and I was like, wow. This is like the kind of stuff when I start to zone out like this, when I can't even like function with these things, where I could be heading for like a long depression, which is natural after kind of having a party for a year, more or less, for a few months. So I was kind of paranoid about depression. And then, like, I've discovered this Buddhist kind of a coping strategy that I thought was interesting. So basically, when like depression arises in you, or like some heartache or some sort of a pain like that, you register it on your body, and you feel it like on your body, like in your heart, basically. the point of doing this is not so much to like hold it or accept it or something, but to turn off your conceptual thinking. Like in Buddhism, only one type of an awareness is active at one point. So when you're listening and watching me right now, they're actually, from a Buddhist point of view, they actually like are flipping back and forth so rapidly that we don't notice it. But actually, it's kind of like when you don't feel your arms or legs when you don't need to, basically, kind of an idea. So anyway, so by focusing on this pain, you're shutting off your conceptual thinking about it, and you're shutting off relating to it from the point of self. So you just don't tell yourself a long story about it by reinforcing it. You just kind of isolate it as a feeling. And then after this process has subsided, then you take a vow not to think about things that are just going to continue with this narrative. This is what Buddhists do. You can like take a vow for one day not to eat meat. These vows are about like controlling your karma by making conscious decisions um, to take these daily vows. And of course, monastics have lifelong vows, etc. So then you take a vow not to think about it, and it's taking a vow and just saying don't think about it are actually different things, because once you take a vow, you firmly establish a reason not to think about something. And when you do so, every time you start thinking about it, you just think vow. And it actually works. I found that it actually works over time. So with this kind of thing, I seem to have like uh, prevented it from developing or prevented certain depressive states, but I don't know if this is going to hold. I think it works on maybe like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it works on maybe milder forms, but now I'm kind of worried about getting my ass kicked and just being out of commission for a year or something with a depression. So anyway, so that's kind of what I've been doing. But overall, I'm just still having fun, still watching Buddhist videos all the time. Just kind of having a good time, I guess. So any thoughts on this, Brian?
Definitely looking forward to the Buddhist video.
Yeah.
Is this going to be the final installment, or do you have a couple more?
Yeah.
This is the final one?
Yeah, this is the final one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I like the idea of the vow, even be it a temporary vow. It's kind of an interesting trick to like refocus yourself immediately. I might try that. For some stuff.
Well, it's interesting to examine, like to experience psychological pain without concepts, without like a narrative. I think that to me is the most kind of like the more kind of powerful aspect of it, because then you just experience it as pain as opposed to experiencing it as a pain and a narrative that kind of increases this pain. So if you don't have a sense that there is a conceptual kind of some sort of a conceptual dance you can do around it, it actually kind of works very nicely. You're just like, I'm feeling pain. Your mind is focused on the body as it's experiencing this pain, and then you experience it more as a physical sensation than a heartache, strangely enough.
I guess I'm kind of an emotional person because that's kind of how I feel emotional pain. I don't really experience it as a psychological burden, I suppose. It's more
So you
like
more naturally, it goes toward the heart more naturally.
yeah. Like earlier today, actually, I was looking at a Google Maps of my old house where I lived with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and the house is completely different now. Like the person who owned it like gave it to his son, and we were just renters, and they changed kind of like the landscaping. They changed all kinds of things. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But I felt, I didn't so much think that it was so different. I felt it. Like I felt this this heaviness in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Strange. It's very strange. But I mean, that's just an example of
But you didn't then go into a long narrative about this stuff.
No, not at all. I mean, I just kind of felt it, and I was like, well, I don't want to look at this anymore, and I, did something else. But yeah, like it was unpleasant. I mean, it wasn't great, but I felt like I processed what I was feeling at the moment was actually processed in that, and sort of the letting go of wanting to reminisce or letting go of wanting to be different than it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, I guess this stream has taken a somber turn, but here, of course, the one sort of thing that can definitely change everything now. Brian is occupied, has a lady friend, but for many of us, of course, we turn to Professor Peterson to know about, like in this case, women's desire for real men. So are you ready, Brian, for this load of wisdom?
Oh man, I'm so ready. Let's do this.
Women prefer men who are about 4 to 5 years older than them, and they marry across and up dominance hierarchies. So there's the evidence for this with regards to IQ is quite clear. As a woman's IQ increases, the probability that she'll be married decreases. And the reason for that is that she's looking. You imagine a very accomplished woman. I've known many, many extremely accomplished women. Okay, so the women I'm talking about, and I've known, I would say, several dozen of them because of the work I do in consulting. Yeah. Most of the women I've known who are like this are lawyers, but many of them are businessmen or partners in consulting firms or professors for that matter. So these women are often, say they're about 29 to 30, something in that range. Yeah. They're very attractive.
Something in the range of that 1 year, 29 to 30.
29 or 30.
Yeah.
Right in there.
Right. Something in that, give or take a couple of months.
They're very well put together. They're very physically fit. They're extremely conscientious. They're very, very career focused and driven. And they're extraordinarily intelligent. Well, they intimidate every man who comes near them. I mean,
yeah, I can imagine.
And it isn't because they're acting in an intimidating manner, although they do. It's also because men tend to mate across and down dominance hierarchies. And there just aren't that many men who are attractive, 30, very career focused, very conscientious, very well put together physically, very intelligent, and earning a very high salary. Like the number of guys like that who are also unattached. Like there aren't any guys like that.
Yeah. And I mean,
so and then you add one dimension to that, which is that a 29 to 30-year-old woman, say, brings a problem to the table that a 23 to 25-year-old woman does not bring to the table, which is that she wants to have a child tomorrow, whereas a 25-year-old woman wants to have a child sometime in the next 5 years. And so unless the guy that she's looking for, this 29-year-old woman, is like ready to go at the drop of a hat, then it's easier for him to just pick a younger woman who is also not as intimidating. And so this happens all the time. And it, I mean, there's no place to lay blame. It's just how it is. I mean, I understand why these women are doing what they're doing. They, no woman wants to find a man she has to support. And the reason for that is because she's actually looking for support because she wants to have children. And that's perfectly reasonable. But there are circumstances under which that radically reduces the domain of choice that's left for certain women. The thing is, women.
So, Brian, so far we've heard, I think, I guess the ladies, they just have to look a little bit down, kind of, they kind of, ladies, your hand always reaches for that top shelf. Maybe that shelf, there's nothing there anymore. You just kind of, you have to kind of go down.
I can't even believe this is taken seriously by people. Did Jordan Peterson not consider that these women who are between the ages of 29 and 30 years old, did he not consider that these women were actually at one point the 25 and 24-year-old women that he was just talking about? Is this like supposed to be a comprehensive thing? Because check this out. Here's the thing. I know lots of successful, attractive women as well. The thing is, and my wife is actually one of them. The thing is that while no one's looking to be in a position to have to support a man, no one's in that position, okay? At the same time, they are looking for support in a very different way than we might be perceiving, and that is emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
If you can emotionally support someone, in this case, a woman, I mean, the world is yours.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's strange. The formulation of this argument is very, very strange to me.
Yeah. So basically, like a man like myself who wants to maybe a high IQ lady,
Yeah.
Should kind of manipulate myself with, pretend to like pretend to feel more for the distresses of my relatives, and just kind of.
You don't need to pretend that, man. You just need to get in touch with yourself. This is the embarrassing thing in regards to Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson claims to be a Jungian, right? He likes the Jung. And as I've brought up and as I've posted and has finally sunken into some of the, I've credited myself for this part of the discourse regarding Peterson, is that Jung focused on the integration of anima and animus, which is the female and the male in the individual. And that is what brings about part of the individuation process. And so by denying, Peterson is all on about this chaos dragon bullshit. And I get it. I get why women appear to be chaos to Jordan Peterson. Okay. And I get why women appear to be chaos to many, many men. The problem is that they're just human beings, just like anyone else. And they have needs. They have emotional needs. They have sexual needs. They have material need. Like, all of these things factor into this. Men aren't having sex. Like, the problem isn't men aren't having sex because women are successful. The problem is men aren't getting in tune with themselves. Like, it's part of the problem.
Well, I mean, basically, I think we currently really don't have much of a society. People don't talk to their neighbors, whatever. All these kind of normal people don't join like organizations as much, like churches or whatever.
Sure.
So you go online and then you develop kind of hyper standards for the people you want to meet. They naturally become more like a consumer good. So it's like if you have high standards like I do, then you just sort of prepare to kind of being alone as a possibility for the rest of your life. I mean, it's true, but it doesn't just appeal, it doesn't just concern like this one demographic of successful women. I'm sure that there are successful women who have unrealistic standards, but they're not the only ones. And then people who don't have standards, they get fucked as well. So, I mean, if we talk about like generalities of having kind of unrealistic standards, then, many people are susceptible to it. And like more so than anybody else are the incels who like feel entitled to some hot babe, while hating while being so outraged that somebody looks down on them as they fucking look down on most women who they don't find attractive. So something like that. Yeah, I mean, high standards, you can fuck yourself with that, but there isn't anything specifically like female about it.
I mean, I've changed to an extent, a very small extent. I've changed my tune a little bit on the incels because I have come to understand that like things have changed, and more often than not, we don't think of society changing in very specific ways very rapidly, but in
your mic is off.
Yeah, every time I hit that space bar, it's because my screen keeps going off. In one particular way, our society has changed, and that is the commodification of the human being. Like the neoliberal fucking tide has washed in, and now we're treating people as what can you do for me? You know, and when we start to do that, and when you have that coupled with fantastic technology that enables people to view the entire mating field before them with the swipes, you know, like I never participated in the swipe thing.
Yeah, swipe. Yeah.
So I see, like, I understand where they're coming from, because it must be hard. Like, it must be really difficult.
Yeah.
But still, I think the key is, and unfortunately, it's like you have to play this type of game, is that you've got to work on yourself. You've got to continually, like, some of the things that Jordan Peterson actually says aren't bad. It's just that his ideology is completely fucking riddled his brain.
Yeah.
So that he can't think about these things in the right way. Like, yeah, should you develop yourself? Of course you should. But you shouldn't necessarily do it in the way that he's saying, you know, by having now we have an excuse as to why women aren't engaging with men on a lower tier as he's perceived with this hypergamy shit. Okay, like, yeah, I get statistics, man. Like, I get it. The problem is, every instance in life, every moment in your life is a particular.
Yeah.
It's not a statistic. Okay, and that's the thing that we have to remember. So the black pill is too extreme in my view. However, I understand the conditions that some of these men are finding themselves in.
I don't really like, as somebody who's like been profoundly isolated, I don't like, that's the one thing that I don't have any sympathy for. I mean, unless it's true, if you're severely deformed as a man or a woman,
Sure,
you know, that's a horrible situation, and we're all very defined by looks and so on. But I mean, if you're it's like, I do nothing to meet women, and therefore I don't meet them. I do nothing.
sure.
So, you know, if you want to do something, you want to look for places to go, like even a fucking Dharma center or something like that. So, I mean, you really have to, like, join some place where you interact with people, because, yes, on a dating website, you're going to be commodified. So, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing more to it than that. You just fucking go out somewhere and meet people, and if you don't meet people, you're not going to... meet people. So it's
Well,
not
like,
really
you can,
more complicated than that.
so you can meet people in IRL, you can meet people on the apps, but the thing you need to remember, especially a man in orientation to women in general, like, you need to remember that women love serendipity. They love serendipitous moments in which this thing happens, all of a sudden, hey, you met this person. They love that shit. Everybody does. All right. When you find yourself in a situation like that, you've presented yourself. You have to approach the world in a particular sense, in a particular way, with a mindset. Yeah. And if you go into the world with that mindset, I feel like things can happen. Like, all that PUA shit. Like, trust me. Like, that was actually my era of when I was, like, trying to get a girlfriend, trying to meet women. When I watched all that stuff, it was crap. Because you can't really fake personality. You either have it or you don't. Okay, so a lot of it is selling you it's just selling you a fucking false dream. But the truth is that what you can do is improve what you've got right in front of you. And if you start to work on what's going on in here, and you start telling yourself that things are possible. I mean, I don't care if you have to go do silly chaos magic to make it happen. Like, I'm into the occult and shit. You can make things subconsciously work a little bit better for yourself so you have an easier time in the world. But if you approach the world in a different way, it's not going to matter if that woman is incredibly successful or incredibly attractive. If you're the right kind of person, does an incredibly successful woman even worry about needing a man to support her in a financial sense? Probably not. Now, does she worry about it in an emotional sense? Probably.
I mean, yeah, but, I mean, the bottom line is like the more people you meet, the more chances you have of like how many like male. That's the other alternative I always talk about. Like, how
Sure.
many male friends have you really met as an adult? Not that many, right? How would you increase
No.
the probability of meeting them? Well, you would need to fucking go somewhere and interact
Yeah.
with them.
Yes.
So it's like it's not really kind of rocket science. It's true. People are superficial. Men and women are superficial. Those standards exist, and that's
Yeah.
fucking it. You meet a bunch of people, and the more of them you meet, the more chances you have
This is
of
true. Yes.
yeah. And there isn't really kind of too much of strategizing there. But yeah, I mean, if you have high standards, also like in my case, in my whole life, and I'm like now moving into my mid 30s, low to mid 30s. But uh, the number of women I have been seriously like attracted to is 3. So like that's with these kinds of standards. Yeah, the hand reaches for the top shelf, and then nothing fucking happens.
Wait, do you mean like of women that you've had access to, or just like in general, or what?
Well,
like,
no, I mean, of course, physically, I've been attracted to more than 3.
Okay.
But as far as like of the ones that I've met, yeah,
I see what you're saying.
yeah. So, but whatever. I had the preoccupation with that girl from Seattle for years, and I don't regret it because it was fun to take that ride
Mhm.
psychologically with the romance in my head and so on, and her being an avatar of happiness. But I don't necessarily want to go, happen again because one more time and I'm fucked. But that one time was cool, so I think I enjoyed it more in retrospect than actually if we had a normal relationship. Well, anyway, let's see what Dr. Peterson has in store for us here.
Women also underestimate the degree to which men are terrified by women. And it's because men's experience, generally speaking, is, although it's changed to some degree in recent years, is that the most probable answer to the question, "Will you give me your phone number?" is, "Are you kidding?" Right. So exactly. So the probability of rejection
A
is
fucking fat hamster in the corner. He knows this.
What year is this? No one asks for your phone number anymore. No,
Yeah.
I know as much. I know that at least. You don't ask for someone's phone number. People are on other shit.
Yeah. And it's like, well, how could it be otherwise? Also, like literally everybody gives you their phone number, or I mean, presumably some people are going to be taken or uninterested. Like literally every woman needs to be interested in you.
I don't know, man. Let's hear this shit that they're dropping a
very,
little
very
bit more.
high. And these women that have all these things going for them are also terrifying targets for rejection. And men also assume that, well, they must be flooded with requests, and they don't even bother. And then the age thing also kicks in hard. And this is one of the things that makes women's lives particularly complicated, in my estimation, is that they have to solve all the complicated problems of life in the time from the age of 20 to the age of 35, and men just don't have to do that. So the pressure isn't there for men. And so as women move towards their 30s, the power relationship between men and women also starts to transform, because, I mean, there's almost nothing less valued than a young man. But that starts to change as men move towards their 30s if they're successful. Whereas there's almost nothing more valued than a young woman. But that changes as women move towards their 30s. So
yeah, like if you live in a chimp cage, this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you literally live with chimps and there's a less dominant male, this is true, Peterson.
Yeah, it's a strange. He has a strange valuation of people, man. I get what he's saying. I get what he's saying in terms of like the dating scene, I guess. But I also think that Peterson is way too fucking old to be talking about this right now. Like he doesn't know what the dating scene is like right now. I mean, let's wrap it up, and we'll comment on the rest of it. And
so these are biological facts that make the mating situation, let's say, extraordinarily complicated and also quite tragic and even catastrophic. But there's no easy solution on the horizon. It's not like anybody knows what to do about it.
There was
Yeah, I think I played this. Yeah, nobody knows what to do about it except like the people who are fucking living normal lives.
The trouble is, there are these people that are able to comport themselves in this world.
Yeah.
And these people are actually the problem here.
Yeah. Sometimes you really want to shit, but there is no toilet, and it's a catastrophe. Nobody knows what to do about it.
I can't remember the name of the female actress, but she was, I don't know, 50-something. And she was in a newspaper being interviewed, and she was complaining that male actors tend to, when they get older, they cultivate gravitas. People respect them because they're old and they're great. Whereas with older women, people aren't interested. And it's one of those things. Well, if you look back at your career, you made a lot of your success came from your looks, and you flaunted that. You used makeup, you wore low cut tops, and you did photo shoots, and you appeared in a few racy movies to get yourself noticed and things like this. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you were taking advantage of a natural gift that you had, and that has gone because of the passage of time. A man never had that option, so he had to explore other ways to try and make himself be noticed. And so it's not surprising that after cultivating his personality, because he couldn't cultivate his physical looks in the same way, you end up with a different result at the end of that.
Yeah, like fucking Johnny Depp and what's his face, Brad Pitt. They all got like their acting career because of their personality.
These dumb dicks, listening to those dumb dicks, I actually have less game than I had before. Like my wife isn't gonna want to fuck me for like 2 or 3 weeks now. This is the problem. Is you enter into this downward spiral. I think once you enter into this shit, you start watching this shit, and you're like, yeah. This is totally what's going on. This is real. This is real. This is why I'm not getting any action. And when you enter into this tunnel, into this vortex of not getting laid, like you start listening to these people, and these people do nothing but give you the worst possible mindset and advice for this stuff. And it's weird. Have you seen on, because like I'm a member of like many groups on like Facebook that hate Jordan Peterson and all this shit. But there are many females who reach out about their boyfriends who they got with before they were into Jordan Peterson, and now they've become Jordan Peterson fans, and the women are like, "Oh my God, you have to help me. Like, what can I do?" And they don't understand that this dude is like, I mean, it's not even low-key misogyny. Sometimes it's like full-blown misogyny.
Well, it's like, yeah, by the time you get all this fucking advice from the lobster, like meeting a woman is like a Soviet, like a Russian spacecraft, like docking into the space station. Yeah. I mean, it really becomes like so fucking convoluted. I mean, of course, there's like half-truths to all of them. Like if you're very picky, you're gonna end up single, like man or woman, or and then you can apply them to a specific demographic if you want and find like verifications that, because we're literally fucking talking about half of the human population here, there's going to be a lot of fucking variations, and whatever like stupid fucking stereotype you slap on it, there's going to be statistically people who meet it. So, but yeah, I mean, like I could sit here and say, oh, you know, like I'm living with my mom, and you know, I'm a low kind of hierarchy male, and then a woman in my age would want to have children, and all of these things have a degree of truth to them. But the bottom line is, again, if I go out and fucking meet people, then like I go beyond statistics, you know. But if you have no like experience, no fucking data to collect except from the fucking lobster and the douchebag, then you're just gonna be defined by their numbers and the shit that they pull out of their ass.
Well, this is what's weird about this. It's like on this end, it's like, oh, well, how much is Jordan Peterson pulling right now? You know, his 55-year-old married self. Like, how much young female stuff is he getting? on his end? I don't think very much. But on the other side, you have the douchebag, pickup artist who's also feeding you a stream of lies in order to get you to buy, programs and, used to be tapes or whatever, like the DVDs, lecture series on how to pick up women. Like what you could do instead, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but you could go out into the world, maybe your coworkers, maybe someone your age, you have friends, you have friend circles, you get introduced to new people. Like what Peterson and what pickup artists are talking about seem to be the same thing, which is like this pickup line kind of approach with like a woman that you see on the street. You know how many times that's worked? Like not at all ever in the history of the world has that ever worked.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a low hierarchy, like the woman doesn't know anything about you, she's not making judgments about you based on that. If you see an attractive woman and you approach an attractive woman, it's just on looks. It's just right then and there. It's on looks. And let me tell you, if you're not like a 10 or maybe like a 9.5, you're not going to ever be able to like say something and pick up a woman. That's never going to happen, because no matter what you do, that is acting fucking creepy. And unless you're a super hot dude, then you're not going to get any, nothing's going to come from that.
I think that certain like pickup artist like strategies probably would increase your chances, but that's another fucking creepy field of like saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, it's creepy. I mean, just don't do creepy things. Like actually, here, check this out. This is going to be my dating advice here. If you can get yourself in a situation with a woman and just not be creepy for like 30 minutes, the doors are going to start to open.
That's true. Well,
like if you can just prevent yourself,
leave your room and stop watching fucking Peterson the way I want.
Sure, exactly.
And watch Buddhist videos and just like talk to somebody. And it's, like life is fucking unfair. It's true. Like, I'm such a special person, Ivan. I can't fucking organize my own fucking adult life and live with my mom. And then some woman don't want to fucking date me. What a fucking
she would have to know a lot about you to get to that point, though.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I just wear it on my sleeve that I live with my mom. between my mom and my creepy man. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I wouldn't listen if I were a young man out in this game right now. I wouldn't be listening to Jordan Peterson to try to get something.
It's the worst fucking thing you can do. These fucking characterizations from The Lobster.
It's super weird. It's super weird, and there's like a bitterness to it. There's like this really weird like bitterness. You know how attractive bitterness is?
Yeah.
You ever see when they make fun of like what they call the feminazis? Like the very bitter, angry women? Like, do you find that attractive? Because that's what you're doing. Like, it's not attractive. So
I think you're better off like wearing a giant like lobster medallion, literally made out of a dead lobster shell, than like listening to Peterson. It would be more of like a conversation piece. I mean, the bottom line is this: life is fucking unfair. People are judging you all the time, and the way you kind of break through that is, to interact with the maximum amount of people to break through whatever stereotypical judgments people might have about you. Like, it's true, life is unfair and people judge other people superficially. On the other hand, like when they get to know them, they have a 3-dimensional judgment. And there is like no other like fucking way of doing it. And, in a certain situation, if you have high standards, then you have to hit the numbers and just, find places to meet women. And, it's like you need to right now make a conscious effort right now to make a male friend. Like all the friends that I have made, for the most part, are connected with this channel. So, I mean, so it's kind of like meeting, like imagine meeting a good male friend that you could really hang out with and really kind of have a heart-to-heart conversation, really be bros with as an adult. It's fucking difficult, and people are going to have superficial judgments of you. So if you really are set on this mission, you're going to fucking get out of your house and fucking meet people. So What else can I say?
I mean, really, when it comes down to it, these people are just relationship Marxists.
Yeah.
You know, it's the capital is what they desire.
Yeah.
They want to be the capitalists, but they're just lowly workers. You know,
Right. They want to
And
seize.
they're trying to make this problem. They're trying to make this problem a systemic problem.
Yeah.
This isn't a systemic problem. This isn't like an economy. Like, this isn't something that's structured with like something that you actually like have value assigned to, that you exchange for goods and services. Stop
Yeah.
treating people this way. Like, if you just stop treating people this way, you have taken the first step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's like, how many men like who are lonely are bitching about the fact that certain types of men are not going to be their friends. It's just because
Sure.
you're lonely, you want fucking intimacy. A woman is an ultimate answer to loneliness if you're heterosexual. And yeah, like, I haven't heard of too much of this, like, anyway. But yeah, so that's basically it. And then there are just these capitalists like Peterson who, fucking make money off of that shit with their like hyper analyzation of this stuff. That's well, it is what it is, I guess.
I mean, the problem ultimately, it takes care of itself, because we don't have a generation of these stupid wannabe fuckboys anyway.
Yeah.
They're not going to be mating anytime soon. So hopefully, like, this can be weeded out in a few generations.
Yes. So let's talk about another issue here concerning men and women. And this is an episode that happened in Russia recently that have captured my attention, and the attention, frankly, of much of Russia now. So are you seeing the gentleman there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is Oleg Sokolov. You see him here in a certain kind of outfit,
It's
Brian.
fancy. It's
Yeah,
fucking
very
fancy.
fancy, and his face really matches it, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's got this weird kind of austere kind of look. It's weird. Yeah, totally.
Let's see here.
Is he fucking LARPing right there? What is he doing?
There
This
he
is
is.
like, this is extreme cosplay.
Yeah.
Wow,
Like, this isn't a movie. This is cosplay.
that's intense.
Yeah, so he's dressed now as Napoleon, and he's like a Russian professor of history at a prestigious university in St. Petersburg. It's the second most prestigious university in Russia, after the Moscow State University, where my parents went
Mhm.
and where my dad taught physics. But anyway, he taught like at the St. Petersburg State University, and he really, as you can imagine, was really interested in Napoleon and Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah,
Here
like a
you can
lot.
see him like launching leisurely.
Why is the poor woman's face blurred out?
Well, it's
She's
because
like, I don't want to be in this.
Oh, exactly, because he killed and dismembered a woman.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
This is all adding up with the LARPing.
Yeah. So let's see here. Yeah, so there she is.
Oh no, that's his victim?
Yeah,
This is horrible.
yeah.
Why- what? Is he in jail?
Well, yes. So what happened is that basically he kind of had a strange setup in his classroom where for some reason he was like dating multiple female students. So he's in his 60s and she's in her like early 20s or mid 20s, whatever. And basically there was one story about him when one of his male students accused him of plagiarism based on a work of another Russian historian.
Mhm.
And he had some goons drag him out of the classroom and beat him outside.
Wow.
So it was a strange classroom. So yeah, he not only did he dress as Napoleon, but there's a good evidence that he actually believed himself to be a reincarnation of Napoleon.
Oh shit! This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he looks very intense. So basically, what happened is that he was accused by other of his female students of when she wanted to leave a relationship, he tied her up to a chair and tortured her. And
Wow.
he faced no consequences because he was connected with the government. He was connected with the Russian historical society that is run by the Minister of Culture of Russia that promotes propaganda about Russian history, patriotic propaganda. And he was a part of it. So, and as a professor, he got off. And this time, she was arguing with this kind of unfortunate woman. And here you can see the boats, I guess. So he killed her. Then there was a party at his house with her corpse was dismembered and hidden there for his alibi, I guess.
God.
And then he took her dismembered body and started throwing it into the river, into the canals in St. Petersburg. And however, he was drunk. He got drunk and was crying. And so he actually fell into the canal.
What an idiot.
Yeah, and so the police dragged him out and found human remains in his backpack. So now he got busted, of course, and he was crying and but they only gave him 3 years for this.
They only gave him 3 years?
That's what I've heard.
I have to go process this while I'm in the bathroom. You'll have to
Yeah.
excuse me for a moment.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. I've been trying to be hydrated because I got this cold thing going on. I'm gonna process this in the bathroom. I'll be right back.
All right.
Horrifying.
Yeah, so I don't know what to say more here. I mean, Russia sometimes says lenient sentences, which is strange. Russia's sort of stuck between hardcore sentencing and sometimes lenient sentencing. Basically, if you get accused of something, you're destined to go to jail, but sometimes your jail terms are pretty ridiculously low. But in his case, it was likely because of his connections with the government. But yeah, I guess without Brian, I'm not sure what to say. But it's a kind of a specific story that's only seems to be something a Russian specialty. But in a sense, when you do believe you are Napoleon, you do really kind of bear the weight of the crown or whatever, the fucking hat that Napoleon wore. I don't know why this is here. He was really into the role. It's also kind of strange because, of course, Napoleon invaded Russia. So it's a strange person to identify with. So, Brian, what are your reflections on this tale?
I have returned.
Yes. What are your kind of reflections? What have you thought about in the bathroom?
Well, I can't believe that he only got 3 years based on the way that they found him.
Yeah.
Based on him falling into the fucking river that he's chucking body parts into, ugh. And then just, he heaves a little too hard and goes tumbling in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only kind of positive thing I can say here at all is that at least he seems to have some degree of remorse, which doesn't. Well, maybe, but I mean, sometimes some of them are really like he. I mean, that in no way excuses anything. But if somebody were to kill and dismember me, at least I would, I mean, at least he shed some tears, which in no way, whatever. I'm not in any way like saying that this means that he should, he should have gotten more and maybe locked up for life. But
Are they sure that this is his first kill? His first kill?
From what I understand, like there was evidence that he has been abusive before, but there is no kind of evidence that he killed anyone.
No disappeared people that took his class once.
Yeah, I just kind of like that he had like some people ready at his classroom to like drag somebody out when he was accused of plagiarism. Like, who are these like history students who like fucking do that?
It's pretty weird, man.
Yeah.
This is definitely an extreme case. But I love that he has all these Napoleonic War pictures.
Well, I mean, he really does have a gravity to him. You'd think that he was an actor playing a role, but I mean, people said that he often started speaking as if he was Napoleon and would often like collapse back and forth. So
I've known some characters, man. There's one guy I know. He cleans my furnace. He comes over and he does a killer Dudley Moore. So
yeah.
he does like this amazing Dudley Moore impression. And it's like he embodies him. It's pretty scary. I asked him to stop and finish up his job the last time.
Well, unlike me, like this guy can actually get people to listen to his shit, I guess. If I was talking about like being a Mongol Lama, nobody gives a shit.
I mean, I give a shit.
Well, as a kind of as a Buddhist, I wouldn't then be able to do these things. So I'm kind of a more benevolent.
You wouldn't be able to chop up a woman and throw her into the.
Yeah, more benevolent like psychosis. Yeah. Yeah, I can't even like kill. I just kind of dream about meeting the Dalai Lama and him recognizing me.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Let's feed off this fantasy for a minute. What have you imagined that's going to happen between you and the Dalai Lama? And I want to know all the way, like the full fantasy.
Okay. This is kind of intimate to talk about, but I will anyway because I have to make a commitment to it not being real. But effectively, I would start my Buddhist group, and then we would meet with His Holiness. So this case, like I would say nothing right about this. But then over the course of our conversations, like our karmic connection would be evident. And we would have private conversations, and he would remark on that, and then he would we would start kind of looking at who I could be to have a karmic connection with him. And so at this point, either the name would occur to him, or he would ask me. And then I would plead not to be recognized, which is kind of true. I actually wouldn't want to be recognized because it would be embarrassing. But then he would just say no, and then I would say, happy to serve, stuff like that. I would find my identity finally.
This is a very delicate fantasy. So he would sort of recognize that there is a familiarity.
Yeah, I wouldn't say.
But then you would be like withholding. You would withhold.
No, I wouldn't withhold on that front.
Okay.
I would withhold about him giving me a title.
Okay.
That Lama, like a title that I'm his official reincarnation. But
Gotcha.
I wouldn't withhold on the fact that we have a connection. I would be happy with it. But then I would say it's going to be cartoonish to recognize me. People, are going to doubt me. It's whatever.
But this is something that actually happens. Like, people are recognized as reincarnations of previous lamas, right?
There are Westerners who've been recognized, but as children usually.
But even with him, even sitting beside him, like that guy is actually a reincarnation of someone from the past, right?
There is one Westerner. Yeah, there are a few of them, but there is one who his parents had a Dharma center at that time, and like the Lama came, and he really took to the Lama and started like talking to him, and allegedly said some Tibetan words to him. And then the Lama like said, "Okay, well, there is a karmic connection here," and they went back to India to the monastery, and they started looking through the lists. And they found a Lama he could be recognized as, and then they consulted the Dalai Lama, and then the Dalai Lama came, and like this child appeared, and the Dalai Lama officially recognized them. And then this kid, like as a child, went to the monastery and learned Tibetan in 7 months, and started debating there, monastic debates, which is kind of a skill. You learn philosophical monastic debates, and that's what his previous reincarnation was, a good debater. And then then he later left the monastery and he went to Tibet, and was at this monastery where his previous reincarnation was, and he met a monk there, and the monk was randomly saying, "Hey, my Lama was such and such, and I guess they found a Westerner who's a reincarnation of him." And he said, "Yeah, I'm him."
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so I guess I don't really necessarily want this to happen. I want this to happen on some level, and on another level I don't. But I also have like these experiences before I became a Buddhist and had no interest in becoming a Buddhist. That I had 2 pictures of the Dalai Lama when I was in college. I had no interest in becoming a Buddhist at that time. And I barely knew who he was, but I did have 2 pictures of him. One of it was like quite large. This one, I printed it out when I was in college before I was a Buddhist or anything.
What was the urge to print it out?
Well, that's the thing. I have no idea. So then it was like above my monitor. And, I collected like rosaries, Catholic rosaries. I was not a Christian at the time, and like malas are important in Buddhism, the beads.
Oh yeah, I have one right here. This type of thing.
Yeah, so I had like a notion that my happiness is connected to these rosaries, even though it was clearly outside of the Christian religion. And then I also was obsessed with the number 4, that the number 4 is lucky, the 4 noble truths, and other 4 immeasurables, 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma. And then the reason I went to Seattle was because of course, the band Nirvana. I had no other reason to be there. So those kinds of things, like aside,
is that actually the only reason?
Yeah.
That's the only reason why you went to Seattle?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Did you ever go to see where Kurt lived?
I didn't care about it by that point.
Oh, you didn't care it by the point that you lived there. You didn't care about it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's the original reason I went. So those things like Buddhists would like all recognize as karmic traits, but that doesn't mean that I'm like would just be karmic imprints from a previous life, but that doesn't mean that I'm a tulkud. But the things like that they would all recognize as karmic imprints.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I don't know if I have any fantasies on the level.
I think you need to be mentally ill to be to have those.
I mean, I'm not typical, what do they call it? I have issues,
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't like disrupt my life that much, but my experiences have given me issues.
Yeah. Well, finally, the kind of perspective visit with the Dalai Lama, and like another part of this fantasies, I always would say later on, I thought I was insane. I thought I was mentally ill, and so it's crazy for me to now be recognized. That's a big part of this fantasy, is saying that I thought, but then I got recognized. So part of me is waiting for this giving of final kind of identity and meaning to me through this recognition.
So there's resolution. There's like a big resolution in it for your life. It's like bigger.
Yeah. So the notion is that I've been drifting around because I wasn't connected with my core mission from the previous life. So my whole kind of life right now is like drifting around in anticipation of this. But here there is another sort of fruits of my mania, and that's kind of a Batman script that I have in my head. So, Brian, are you pumped for this?
Yeah, man, let's do this.
Yeah, I'll try not to torture you too much with it. But so the action begins when a child is taken to an amusement park. Now, at this amusement park, his parents meet a violent demise. So the security for whatever the fuck Bruce Wayne's father's name is was laxed, and they were sitting in the car and drinking. And as they went on this, they got assassinated in like a dark alley in like a fucking alley in this amusement park. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then the child runs away and goes into a cave. Now, you know what's in the cave, Brian.
Bats are in the cave.
Exactly. So there are a lot of bats, and he's terrified. He associates bats with like horror. So then he's being let out of this cave by the security, and they have the person who shot his parents kind of kneeling on the ground. And these kind of are ruffians, and they offer this child to pull the trigger. So he refuses. You see, this happens first, then he runs into the cave, okay? Fucking forget, and then he gets scared. Okay. Right, so this is that part of the aspect. So now he's kind of like a degenerate kind of a playboy, and he's living off of like money from effectively his former chief of security kind of, throws him money as a young man. So basically, like, the chief of security really killed his parents, but he covered it up by killing this, guy who actually did it. And so now he kind of manages, like, Bruce Wayne's life and maybe wants to kill him later also. And so Bruce Wayne is kind of this degenerate playboy. He's like a kind of a face of the company, but everybody doesn't take him seriously. And theoretically, he's waiting on his inheritance to come through.
So he's still pretty young.
Yeah, he would be in his early 20s, something like that. But maybe not so young, I don't know. Basically, he's kind of cucked in a way and kind of relegated to the mansion. So that's one line of the narrative. So at this point, he wakes up with the bats. He goes to the psychiatrist, and all of these things happen. And one time, as he drives out of a psychiatrist, he sees an injustice, like a family is being harassed, and he just takes his motorcycle and like runs over one of the offenders, and the other one he kills. So this is like a dark kind of a thing, and he gets so he gets a taste for blood. So effectively, at this reason, he starts kind of acting more and more violent and unhinged, and he always has to restrain him from like killing the criminals. And he wears different types of weird outfits, basically, and sometimes his mask falls on the floor and stuff like that. So he's basically kind of unhinged and losing it. Okay? So that's one side of the coin, okay? So then the other part of this is all right, so there's like a Polish butcher, right? An immigrant to like Gotham, right? Yes, and he's basically illiterate, uneducated, but he's good at his butchery business and becomes wealthy. But he's not accepted into the WASP society. And so he comes to these parties and people kind of make fun of him and snicker about him because of his accent, etc. But the only person who like takes pity on him is this like blind aristocrat lady. Then they get married. She's blind, and then they have a kid. And this kid turns out to be like a genius, right? So he's a chess genius, and in many other ways. However, at some point, he starts acting strange. Like he flips over the chessboard and just starts acting strange and kind of maybe laughing a little bit to himself, but nothing too crazy. And so his father now has a chip on his shoulder. His wife is blind. He wants to be a part of the society, and now his kid is crazy. So he thought that his kid was going to carry him into high society by being brilliant, but now he's acting nuts. And so he puts him into an insane asylum, even though he really shouldn't be there. In this insane asylum, he then starts to grow up, become smarter and smarter, but still kind of strange. And now he's embarrassed by him, and he bribes the head of the asylum to put him into the criminal wing. So then with his criminal, there he gets electroshock therapy continuously and gets put onto heavy drugs until his face fixes into a smile continuously. So then he kind of breaks out of there with a nurse who's like going to be Harlequin. So then he kind of lets out the criminal asylum, and then he let me rephrase this. He fries his doctor to death by reconfiguring the electroshock machine. And then he goes to his father's house where he butchers him to death. And then he takes his mother, and then he kind of lives in different abandoned buildings with his mother's effect. So that would be the Joker. So then the Joker effectively takes over the city, but the way he does it in my kind of scenario is not by so much being evil as much as being on the line between good and evil. Having like politicians who sometimes do reforms but are sometimes ousted. Having criminals who are allowed to do certain things, but in certain things he kind of intervenes. So he's basically in charge of the line between good and evil in Gotham, kind of jumping two sides. So then Batman then enters into the scene by being basically disturbed. He eventually kind of starts dressing like a bat, in a predictable way. And at this point, he just takes revenge on his the people who control his company and basically kills all of them. So then at that point they start kind of fighting with the Joker. So I'm not gonna like put into all the details, but at one point they like fight in the amusement park, and at this point like Batman like loses his mask, and Harlequin fucking sees it and wants to tell the Joker who Batman is, but the Joker kills her because he doesn't want to know. Because he's enjoying the game. The game is more important. He wants to find out later. And so sort of Batman wakes up there without his mask, talking to Joker's blind mother, effectively, who's there. And at this point, he's completely confused and he doesn't know if the Joker knows who he is or doesn't. So it is at this kind of a juncture, feeling completely helpless and unknowing, where he kind of becomes Batman in a true sense of the word, or all of his aggression gets repressed into his character. So then kind of I would just kind of skip through to the end. So then there is the final kind of a fight on the pier, and the Joker is fighting Batman, and then the city hall that is controlled by the Joker, the police chief, is also attacking Batman. And in this time, the city hall flips, one mayor resigns because of anyway. There's some story I'm not going to get into. So in the middle of this, as the police is chasing both of them, the police kind of flips and becomes sort of pro-Batman effectively versus being anti-Batman. So as this is happening, like, it would be a dramatic scene where, Joker has fell into the water from the fucking ride. He fell into the water, and then Batman is standing there. He's surrounded by the police that are hostile to him, and his equipment is broken. He's bleeding. He's kind of like a Christ-like figure in a sense, and there is a, he's about to surrender. He has no way to fight on, and his equipment to fly is malfunctioning. And so at this time, there's a huge flock of bats, and they just overwhelm everything with like dramatic music. And these bats are sucking on his blood off of him and just surrounding him. And then his equipment starts functioning, and he flies off into the distance. And then the police the city hall flip. There is a new police commissioner, and the police don't chase him at that point. So then at the very end, so then there is a kind of a scene of a Joker drowning in water, and then his face becomes normal. His kind of grin goes away, and his makeup washes off. So then in the final scene, then there is a train going out of Gotham, and there is a hobo there, and somebody asks for a way in, and it's a man and his blind mother. And then they say hi to each other, and then the hobo tells some sort of a joke, and then the Joker starts laughing, and it kind of accelerates a little bit, but then he kind of suppresses it and looks at the hobo and looks at the Gotham going into the distance. And then there's Batman sitting there somewhere on the building. So that's the end.
It's going to need a script doctor.
Yeah. What don't you like?
Oh, I mean, I like the dark Batman idea. It's interesting that he would be killing people and then have to kind of repress his own urges and desires.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote a lot of screenplays. I've written a lot of screenplays. I've written a lot of scripts for television. None of these things have ever come to be anything real other than television commercials. But
yeah. Well, I'm not as committed to this one as I am to the Buddhist one.
Have you ever looked into screenwriting?
No.
So there's an author named Sid Field who sort of wrote the book. He wrote the book on the screenwriting. I was very interested in being a screenwriter in my younger days. And I got this book, and it teaches you the three act structure. It's just the way a movie, it's just like the language of cinema. And there are story points, and there are things that kind of transition from the other. So you might need to cut out some things. You might need to cut out some things and simplify some other things. Because each unit, the unit of the film is really the scene, the individual scene. So you've got to do some work on figuring out what those scenes are going to be. And it seems like there's a lot of ideas that are more like montage based, but you've really got to drill down into particular scenes.
Yeah, well, I mean, in this case, this is just an outline. I don't really actually take this seriously. So.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I mean, you could write this even as a hobby. It's worthwhile. And maybe when you've written something, I could take a read.
This is kind of like a thing that appeared in my head as I was pacing around here. So it's not like
you can write a script in a day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not hard to write a script. I wrote a script that I attempted to film in like 8 hours, and it, as you can imagine, it didn't turn out very well. But
Did any part of the narrative grip you?
yeah, I mean, you have some depth to the basis of the characters,
Mm.
which is, I mean, it's a retelling. Like, how many Batman stories do we need? You know, that every time I see a Batman trailer, I'm like, fuck again. Like, do we really need another one? But this one actually presents something different in that there's a psychosis between the two. They're locked in this. It's more tangible illness that they're experiencing, that they're actually like manifesting in the world, rather than like, oh, the beneficent dark billionaire guy who he's, you know, mysterious and things, and he's got things. He's much more. He's much sicker, as you would imagine. You know, have you ever read like Watchmen?
Mm. I haven't read any of it, but
No.
I mean, I think that I kind of like the idea of Batman who like breaks down, who like has these bursts of energy, and then sort of just kind of breaks down and is bleeding, and has to like pick himself up by the end of the fight. Like that's kind of the vulnerable, kind of angry and vulnerable Batman is one that kind of attracts me more.
You have the major motions worked out of it. You have the major, you know, the way the plot is going to unfold, and you do have the characters worked out. But the tricky things, the really really tricky things in there, are the things like, okay, well, how does the Joker actually come to power in the city? You know, like you've got to effectively show those things in a very short amount of time, because you could spend an entire movie. Like, this is the problem. This is why I've turned to writing manuscripts, and why I'm not interested in writing screenplays anymore, is because you can really adjust the focus in a manuscript. In a novel, you can adjust the focus and the time, and really not disrupt too many readers. Like, readers will understand, oh, I've really got to zoom into this part, like everything's slowing down, your sense of time reduces. In a film, no, it's completely different. Every page is a minute, and every page you got to have something happening, right? And all of those things have to be coherent with the plot and with the structure of the overall screenplay in order for it to make sense in that cinematic language. So, I mean,
Right.
This is why I gave up on writing screenplays. But
Yeah. So you had some reflections also on the environment, on mosquitoes.
yeah, so what I thought about was this. There's a philosophical question at the core of this, which is, we have the ability to rid the earth of mosquitoes. Okay, we can program them with genes, and effectively in a few generations they are unable to mate anymore. They become sterile. So mosquitoes don't really contribute to what we understand in the world. Like, as far as we know, they're just a burden. They just kill people. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, should we get rid of mosquitoes? Because we can, and the implications of that are that fewer people die because of the mosquitoes, but at the same time, we wipe out a form of life.
Yeah.
So should we or shouldn't we? In your opinion, what do you think?
Well, in this case, in Buddhism, on the one hand, human life is more important than animal life, because humans understand cause and effect. In the human body, we have that ability. On the other hand, all forms of life, conscious life, they have Buddha nature, and they are programmed in the same way, seeking happiness and avoiding suffering within the context of their definition. So therefore, it's kind of more no than yes. But I mean, you could also make a kind of a Buddhist point for it if you wanted to go the convoluted route. But overall, like wiping out a form of life would be wrong. But in a secular,
they might still exist in terms of like a laboratory somewhere where they have the last remaining mosquitoes for studying or something to that effect. But there would be none in the wild.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, from a secular point of view, I think more yes than no. If those all these parameters, I'm sure many of them could be disputed, what you said. But if that were the case, they don't contribute to the biosystem in a significant way, then I think yes. I mean, you wouldn't want to die because of a mosquito bite. What about you? What are your thoughts?
You fucking wipe them out. All of them. Just wipe them.
Okay.
That's where I'm at. And because and the reason is, here's the thing. If you want to look at this like in an ontological way, like the being of the mosquito, like what is it doing? Like the being of the mosquito is inherently flawed because it's killing the thing that it's feeding off of. Okay? Now, nature isn't perfect. We know this, right? And there are lots of species in the past that have gone extinct. We have already fucked up this planet, okay? We've already fucking ruined it. In my view, getting rid of the mosquitoes is like a positive thing that we could do. Other than like, unless you think maybe like, okay, and this is kind of fringe here, but maybe mosquitoes spread viruses and those viruses change our DNA and thus like in some sense like we have mosquitoes to thank for part of our like evolutionary process. I mean, maybe, but at the same time, they kill lots and lots of people. They carry very awful diseases like encephalitis, West Nile.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a sort of a interesting dilemma. I mean, overall, I'm more inclined against it because it's kind of hard to say what their effect on the biosystem is in reality than like hypothetically, like because that's a huge miscalculation potentially to make if they do.
No, you're right. You're right because it could be like we may not understand the amount that like bats, for example, depend on mosquitoes for their biomass. You know, like we may not understand that.
Yeah. So on the other hand, I mean, yeah. So I'm kind of more inclined against it, but I can understand people being for it in a sense. But insects are just like us. They want happiness, don't want suffering. So wiping out a big amount of them is a iffy thing. Well, anyway, my friends, I thought there would be no ambiguity at the end of the stream, but seems like there's still a little bit of ambiguity with the mosquitoes, but it's something you can talk about with your friends and loved ones. So thank you all for watching, and should come up with the latest Buddhist video soon, to the extent anybody cares. But have a good day.